Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Armor of Truth Live, number 397. I mean, we are beating 400 in the back of the head with an axe, aren't we? We're all over it. We're right there. Are Americans freer today than before Trump's presidency? And that means, I guess, to be clear about that, what I'm trying to say is that if you go back to the beginning or the middle of Barack Obama's presidency, go back to the beginning. We'll just go back to the Bush-Clinton era and think forward from there. Do you think that America is freer today than it was under Bush, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Obama? What do you think? Let me just welcome the lovely Summer to the show. Now, hello. Summer, I want to ask you, now I have not prepared Summer here. I'm just asking her cold. I think I know what your answer is, but what do you think? What is your answer to that question? Are Americans freer today than they were before Barack Obama's?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, you think so?
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, all right. Okay, well, there we go. I think maybe many of you will be feeling that way. So what we want to do is we want to look at the statistics. We want to look at the numbers and the facts and the data and sentiment. How do Americans feel in polls? Do Americans feel freer than ever? Do we feel like we're closer to the founders' principles? So from the redefinition of democracy to the continued expansion of the federal government, from chronic abuses of emergency powers to the direct loss of constitutional liberty. Summer has been working diligently for several months now to trace this. And so Summer and myself tonight will trace the loss of your freedoms from Clinton, Bush, Obama era through Biden, and this being the second Trump term. Now, in Summer's work in these articles that you'll see at our Substack account, which are right here, this one particularly, the global order, you'll find it there on armoroftruth.substack.com. You can get it through the Armor of Truth mobile app very easily. This will have many of the links to a series of articles that Summer has written here, a multi-part expose on this very issue. Are we gaining liberties? Are we moving back toward the founders' original principles? I just want, if you ask someone who is an always Trumper, someone who is part of the cult, who never questions Trump, what would they say? Would they answer, Summer, what do you think? How would someone, a baby boomer Trump supporter, how would they respond? What do you think they would say? To the question, are we freer right now than we were during Barack Obama's presidency, for example?
Yeah, of course.
They would think we are?
Many of them would think that, well, it's a tough question. Yeah. It depends on if it's the older boomer segment or the younger boomer segment. The older boomers were the ones that were part of the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and all of that. And so they actually are whining a lot on the liberal side.
Yeah.
So versus the younger ones that I think would be maybe more taken in by MAGA. So they would be maybe largely more duped, into thinking that everything's kind of going back to normal.
Yeah, I think a lot of MAGA are thinking that way, but then a lot of Democrats and Gen Zs are thinking the other way. So what is the truth? Is Trump's MAGA America better, or is the massive power of the global progressive administrative machine, is it too big for even Trump or MAGA, the MAGA movement, to defeat? Or will Trump compromise our liberty for his own legacy? Every president has a legacy and is thinking about his legacy while he's president. And that's the question it will come down to, is will he put his legacy before liberty? Because I think we've seen from the way he went after Massey and pushing for the big beautiful bill, which was really just more of the same. We'll talk about what's in there that's good and what's in there what about that bill that's not good in just a minute. We'll answer these questions for you tonight. But first, we need to remember where true freedom begins and where it ends if we're not vigilant. So before we weigh the policy details, the economic charts, or the party spin, we need to pause to remember something far more foundational, something early Christians understood with absolute clarity, and for which many paid the ultimate price of martyrdom. The early Christians would tell you, without hesitation, that their first and primary loyalty must always be to King Jesus. They knew that Caesar, like every other ruler, holds only delegated authority, authority permitted by God, but never absolute. And so they obeyed the laws of Rome so far as those laws did not contradict the commands of their true sovereign, their Lord. But when the Roman state demanded even the slightest pinch of incense to a false god, when it required a token gesture of loyalty to Caesar as divine, they refused. It's always important to keep in mind that the early Christians weren't persecuted and brutalized and killed for worshiping Jesus. They were brutalized and killed and martyred because they would not worship Caesar. They would rather die than violate conscience and bow to a counterfeit king. They were not interested in being part of the Roman cult. This conviction is not ancient superstition. It's the enduring heartbeat of genuine Christian citizenship. The state is ordained by God to punish evil and reward good, but it doesn't stand above Christ, nor does it have the authority over the Christian soul or conscience. Where the state demands what God forbids, or forbids what God commands, our allegiance is clear. We must obey God rather than men. Our allegiance is to Christ and no other. So this is not just church history. It's the unshakable pillar that has upheld every free people. Because freedom is not the license to do whatever we please. Freedom, rightly understood, is the liberty to live as we ought. Virtue. The way we live constrained by virtue and ordered by transcendent, unchanging, eternal truth. The American founders thought not all Orthodox believers, the American founders were not all Orthodox believers. Many of them were deists. Some of them were probably other things. But one thing is very clear that they grasped profoundly. They never trusted mankind's nature. They knew very well the biblical truth that man is fallen, body, soul, and mind. And so they framed a system to bind that urge for power. They framed a system to check ambition and to restrain our collective bent toward tyranny, because every heart has it. And so the truly brilliant experiment that came out of that still depended on one crucial condition, and that would be that the people, once free, that a free people would remain a moral people, understanding the principles of self-governance first, starting in your own households with self-governance, in in your own churches, bound by virtue that flows from the fear of God. And as John Adams reminded us, he said, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other, unquote. So that tells you right there. The idea of trying to spread democracy around the world is a progressive fool's errand. So we ask again, are we better off today? Are we stronger in virtue today? Are we more anchored to transcendent truth than ever before? Or have we traded away the moral roots that make freedom possible, cheering for temporary wins while the foundations rot beneath our feet? Donald Trump promised to make America great again, to drain the swamp, to take on the entrenched powers. For all intents and purposes, he looked and still looks at times to be against the progressivism that tried to take him out. He signed landmark tax cuts, deregulated whole sectors of the economy, appointed a Supreme Court majority that eventually overturned Roe versus Wade. And now, with the big, beautiful bill, a final, very important piece of his legacy is in place that promises big relief for many American families. But our question, again, is America truly freer? Are we more righteous, more stable? Is the nation more stable for our children? Or have we merely postponed the reckoning while the same massive administrative machine grinds on, only bigger, more expansive than ever, and more insulated from the people it claims to serve? Today, many Americans still look to Washington, D.C., that modern Gomorrah, for salvation. And they forget that no mortal man, however tough, clever, or popular, can walk through that pit of hell and come out without getting something on him. No mortal man can redeem a people who have abandoned virtue. Not even Trump can hold off the progressive Hegelian machine forever, because that machine is bipartisan, deeply entrenched, and older than any single presidency. And of course, we must honestly ask the question whether or not he will work with that movement to ensure his own legacy. So as we weigh this question, are we truly better off? Remember this as we move through these points. If we lose our moral foundation and our virtue-based freedom, America will fall. It's that simple. We can endure economic stagnation, but we cannot endure loss of our moral foundation. No bill, no strongman, no party platform can substitute for a repentant, righteous people under the lordship of Jesus Christ. So in this show, we're going to look at the facts, the sentiment, and the hard data. But never forget, tyranny will not be defeated in the marble halls of the federal government or even at the state house. Tyranny, let me put it this way. Sovereignty and freedom will be defended, and tyranny will be defeated at home, in humble homes, in faithful churches, and in free, vigilant local communities. So stay tuned, and we'll give you the answer to this question in the facts and the data and the sentiment coming right up.
Seek ye the truth, and the truth will make you free, and nothing else will do it. Jesus Christ has never lied to anybody. Why won't you listen to him?
And man will either worship the one true God, or man will worship a lie.
You must stay away from people who will not document as fact what they put in their articles. That's why my broadcast scares the hell out of socialists. That's why I was named as the most dangerous radio host in America, because I shoot documented facts which cannot be refuted. That's what's dangerous. Don't spread a rumor. Spread the truth. Document it. Prove it. Make it irrefutable, and you too will become dangerous.
It's time to speak out. Speak out.
Tweet at
on your Facebook page.
Shout it out to your neighbors and tell everyone you know.
You see, what happens when you broadcast the truth is you piss everybody off.
Faith is resistance.
So, are Americans more free today than before Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill or at any point during Trump's presidency? What do we think? Has the promise of prosperity become a grand diversion? Is it the big, beautiful diversion? A spectacular flourish that keeps us fixated on numbers while the deeper foundation of liberty continues to erode? All right, Summer, will you, why don't you guide us? Let me show this first. I'll show this. And then you guide us to where maybe best place in some of the articles. We can start off maybe with, do you want to start off with the Silicon Valley?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, so I wanted to show the folks this. This is known as the Freedom Index, World Population Review. And you hover over one of the areas and you can see a number between 0 and 100. 100 being perfect liberty. I want to show you this number. Go out here to the United States. Look at that. The United States, now this is according to polls, poll questions and surveys that are done. The United States is polling at 83. Now that's down. Of course, look at Canada. The people in Canada feel that their freedom index, 97%. 83 in the U.S. Look here at Australia. Look at this, 95%. Now let me go ahead and tell you what the Human Freedom Index is. It's an annual report that evaluates the state of human freedom in 165 countries and territories around the world, representing 98.8% of the human population. As of 2023. In other words, so this data is up to 2023. The Human Freedom Index is a broadly comprehensive measure that encompasses both personal and economic freedom and then merges the two into a single value titled simply human freedom. Okay, so it comes from the Cato Institute, the Fraser Institute, and the Liberalis Institute at the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. 12 categories here. This will help you understand what this is really about. Rule of law, security and safety, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, freedom of association, assembly, and civil society, expression and information, freedom of expression, relationships, associations. Again, lots of, you can tell that most of this really has to do with the First Amendment. Size of government, legal system and property rights, access to sound money, is your currency stable, freedom to trade internationally, and freedom from too many regulations. So this index gives each country a score from 0 to 10, wherein a score of 10 represents the most freedom and 0 represents no freedom at all. So in each of the 86 indicators, these scores are carefully weighted and combined to determine the values. For personal freedom and economic freedom, then those two values are averaged to determine each country's ultimate Human Freedom Index score. So there you go. So it comes from the people who live there. And you can see the U.S. Well, people don't feel freer. And that might be, remember, this is as of 2023, Summer. So this is in the middle of Joe Biden's presidency.
Yeah.
For one thing. Now, okay, look over here. Here's Russia, 13. They score a 13. We go in here to China, 9. They don't feel very free there. India, 66. Let's go up here and look at this. Sweden, 99. Are they not socialist up there? Norway, Finland. How about the UK? Right there. 91, Ireland at 97, Scotland's too small to get to. There's Iceland, 94. So you can see that in the West, generally in the West, these numbers are lower than they should be, especially in the United States. Look at, down in Argentina and Chile, you've got a 94 down there. Argentina's an 85. South Africa is at an 80. Look at that. South Africa only 4 points below the United States. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about here. So let's talk about, let's see, I guess I need to make some of these points first about the big beautiful. Since 9/11, I think that's probably a good place to start. For decades now, America's moral soil has been eroding. We can trace much of our present drift back to September 11th, back to 9/11, a day of real tragedy that opened the door for a new kind of state power. In the name of national security, the USA Patriot Act, for example, which we've written about here, which was another exercise of emergency powers and establishing new emergencies, to have more authority, to be able to expand your power. In the name of national security, right, the USA Patriot Act vastly expanded surveillance on citizens. We also had the Department of Homeland Security created. And the TSA very quickly was stood up and put to work normalizing a presumption of guilt in airports, also in train stations. Just presumed guilty in daily life because we have to keep you safe from terrorists. The authorization for use of military force, another one that comes out of the Patriot Act, which fueled perpetual wars and executive overreach, making it easy for, as we saw recently, Summer, for Trump to use the military for that kind of an action in Iran, and without asking Congress. So there's a couple different ways now that the executive branch can take us to war without going through Congress. And one of them is this. It is this authorization for use of military force bill that came through as part of 9/11, of the Patriot Act. And then there's also, as we found at the United Nations.
Yeah, that's been established for decades now.
Well, as the United States, as one of the founders of it, it was determined early on that whenever the UN needed to do peacekeeping actions, it would be the United States military that would fill that need. So that's another way that the president can take us into war, is if he can convince the Secretary General of the UN, or just tell him to request that we do this or that wherever. And you can skip Congress with that one too. So this is a lot of the guys back when they were trying to form the League of Nations. A lot of senators knew back then that this was no good. You can't do this because it will ultimately violate our sovereignty by some foreign body being allowed somehow to use our military and to cause us to bypass our own constitutional war powers.
Right. Go around consent of the governed.
Go right around it. Exactly. That's right. To circumvent the people. And that's what progressivism is. Over time, progressivism is to get the people more and more out of the way. It'd be the democracy of the institutions rather than consent of the governed.
Right. And I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about how, the C-19 event was evidence of this power structure that we're all under, actually, because the whole world just went into unison and that whole program ran. So.
So this, right here in this article that Summer has here right from the top, a gospel replaced. We're living through a historic spiritual transformation, a global realignment, not just of politics and economics, but of truth, worship, and salvation itself. Christianity, once the foundation of Western civilization and the moral conscience of free societies, is being re-engineered into a therapeutic, technocratic tool of governance. The goal is not simply to suppress Christianity, but to replace it with a synthetic, sustainable development goal-aligned faith that serves the new global order. And what Summer is saying here is that this article is kind of kicking off the multi-part expose, several different articles, bringing together key fronts of this transformation. One of them, which we'll look at in just a moment, is Silicon Valley's counterfeit revival. Of course, as we've talked about here a lot, the U.S., the Religious Liberty Commission, which was created by executive order, bad idea, and the bureaucratized White House Office of Faith, which really is, right, Summer, it's really just a repetition of about 4 or 5 sustainable development goals, right? Having to do with mental health and...
it is. It's a violation of religious liberty.
But the fact that it exists.
Yeah, it's there to sort of undo it and put in the ultimately, sustainable development goals from the United Nations and multicultural policy. Like it's the clause of that strangling our religious liberty. When you study it and figure out what it's actually doing, it's undoing our religious liberty.
And also the erasure of the Anglo-Protestant identity, the theological and ethnic foundation of the American Republic itself. And all these initiatives converge toward one unified goal, which is the construction of a one-world faith that denies Christ, erases sin, replaces repentance with compliance. All right, and so this article, we want you to invite you to come check this article out, because we're going to be bouncing over several articles here today, but this is a good one, because this is going to, we'll give you this little intro here. Billionaires like Peter Thiel, organizations like Acts 17 Collective, and churches like Epic San Francisco are being used to rebrand Christianity as a status symbol. This is happening right now out in Silicon Valley. And it's a new kind of faith. It's a new acceptable, right, a more, what was the term we used for he gets us? The approved faith?
Yeah.
Right, because Peter Thiel is a homosexual billionaire, and he has taken up, he's taken up Christianity
Right.
as kind of a hobby.
It looks a lot like the New Apostolic Reformation dominionist religion, but they've just sort of, as we've spoken about before, they're trying to channel and funnel everybody into this oneness religion that's based in theosophical roots ultimately, but they've got to sort of sell it in different ways to different target audiences. So it's very clear that this Peter Thiel phenomenon is sort of got if you look at the tenets of it and how it describes itself, it very much sounds like Seven Mountain Mandate, which is kingdom now. We need to bring heaven to earth. We need to infiltrate the 7 realms of, get into government and all this kind of stuff. So, and it's very heretical. So, super creepy stuff.
Yeah, right here, which this quote, which came from, was it Peter Thiel or someone? It was from the Acts 17 Collective.
Yeah.
Said that the Jesus we know isn't the Jesus of religion. He's the Jesus of the people. Honest Christianity is a radically inclusive faith. I mean, and that is repeating he gets us verbatim.
It is.
That's exactly what they called it, radically inclusive,
exactly.
Radical love. And
there's a unified message there. So that's how you really know how, and all the money that's gone into He Gets Us. And then the fact that they're doing this, like there's a really hard push, and it was, you'll see in these articles that we talk about, like Vanity Fair and Wired Magazine, but basically they're like, they're media platforms that are considered to be sort of, for the highly intellectual, elite type minded people So that is definitely, they've spent some serious marketing dollars in trying to execute that belief system amongst people and make it attractive to them. And so all you have to do is read what they've said about it, and look at their mission statements on their websites, and it's all very, very clear that this is another gospel, and it's the gospel that the He Gets Us campaign approves, which is ultimately approved by Rome.
Absolutely. Because well, at least it was under Francis, and we'll see what happens with this new pope. But it seems to probably be the same.
Yeah, well.
So we also
for
have
sure.
the Religious Liberty Commission, presented as a constitutional victory for faith. In fact, it is the establishment of a civil religion clearinghouse where doctrinal faith is replaced with bureaucratic faith and approved therapeutic interfaith consensus. Under the guise of protecting liberty, it redefines what believers are allowed to believe. Okay, and also the White House Office of Faith, embedded in every federal agency according to their own admission. This office, with its National Day of Prayer, which Summer has written about also, while it's ecumenical prayer is an offense to God, first of all. But anyway, it's modeled after international governance mechanisms. The White House Office of Faith is. They follow right along with the SDGs. They're very happy to meet several goals. Its purpose is to merge religious compliance with policy execution. So faith becomes a deliverable, something that can be monitored and managed and molded to serve state objectives like mental health, inclusion, nonviolence. So it's not liberty. It's not religious liberty. It's not liberty at all. It's liturgical control. Okay? And so ultimately, once again, the erasure of the founding faith. If they can succeed in turning enough people away from the true faith, they know they can bring America down. This was Soviet active measures. It was obviously the first of the four stages to subvert a nation. Demoralization, which literally means, in that context, meant to separate the people from their God, from their ultimate, whatever it is that they were all unified around, separate them from it, get them fighting with one another. As documented in the book Anglophobia, the unrecognized hatred, multiculturalism has been deployed across the Anglosphere not as pluralism, but as a strategy of civilizational inversion. And see, we're also talking about moral inversion, civilizational inversion. Anglo-Protestant Christians, those who gave the West its laws, its literacy and liberty, are now considered a threat to progress. So this new religious regime includes everyone except the historic Christian majority, right?
That's right.
The Religious Liberty Commission and the White House Faith Office.
Yeah.
We saw lots of people saying they're Christians, they're Jews, they're Muslims, they're Sikhs, but we didn't see any.
There's no biblical representation.
Right. There are no,
Bible believing sola scriptura, saved by grace.
Yeah.
The actual, the true church is not there.
An excellent book here I've got up on the screen. This is Glenn Sunshine's Slaying Leviathan.
Yeah, that's an excellent book.
Yeah, limited government, and resistance in the Christian tradition. So this is a good one you've been looking at lately and using in your work. So it's
Yeah, this one's really good if you want to understand the foundations of our nation. There's one particular chapter toward the end of the book that if you just read that chapter alone, you would really be empowered to understand how our nation was really based on, through the laws and the legal system, through God's divine law. It was truly inspired by that, even up into the point where in New England, they made sure that people got an education so that they would be able to come against anybody that tried to do what they're doing now with the Religious Liberty Commission and the White House Office of Faith, so that people would be educated to recognize when someone was trying to put in laws that would come, that would prevent us from having freedom of conscience to worship and proclaim Christ as King. So you can take a historical journey, very easy to read, well written. Definitely recommend it. So definitely check that out.
Okay, can you check and see if we have something on? I hear us like it's playing through a phone somewhere. And
Okay.
I can't. It just.
Did that stop?
Huh?
Did it stop?
Oh, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so through all of this, both wings of America's ruling class. And when we say progressivism, we need to define that for you. We don't mean the left. Progressivism is left and right. The neoconservative right and the progressive left, as they've always been known as, they have come together on all the issues they see as most important. In other words, they embraced a new consensus, and that was the administrative state. And they're so powerful that maybe the administrative state is here to stay. What about the people's voice? People's voices will be tolerated, but never really trusted. They'll try to keep it looking and sounding like it's America. But what you'll find out by the end of this show is that, no, we are way off from our founding principles, and Trump hasn't taken us any closer to them. So that's something to pay attention to. Barack Obama didn't start this drift, in other words. He did solidify it. He did his part. The Affordable Care Act cemented Washington's reach into every home's health decisions. The Dodd-Frank Act extended federal oversight deep into private industry. And when Congress wouldn't cooperate, Obama just famously used the pen and the phone. He expanded rule by executive order, not by debate or consent. And so by the time he left office, the administrative leviathan had grown more robust than ever. So Barack Obama really oversaw the permanent ensconcement of a managerial class that would be insulated from the people that they claim to serve. Now we come back to Trump, elected in 2016. You know, after Bush, Clinton, Obama, and they're really not any different, folks. So after 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Clinton, Obama, I mean, this is a long time.
This really comes down to the reaction is the real action, you know, such as what James Lindsay has made so many people aware of is that, you know, like you build an archetype and you sell it and you have manufactured consent and people believe that, oh, this change is going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, the same thing just moves right along. The same stuff happens.
Yeah, it's the same administrative leviathan is continuing to move right along. So if we go back to 2016, Trump's elected for the first time. And it seemed like it was a rebellion against that very machine, that progressive leviathan. He promised to drain the swamp, bring back jobs. Remember, we love the poorly educated. Mm-hmm. My favorite Donald Trump quote ever.
Right.
So he promised to bring back jobs and cut taxes and secure borders and revive American greatness.
Let us remind you that these jobs that they're creating, supposedly, you know, are not going to be available to people who believe in the Bible. I mean, when it all comes down to it, you know, unless you give your pinch to Caesar and you know, it's all heading that way. Like you're not going to be allowed to have access to these jobs unless you affirm their version of what's you know, appropriate.
I'll come to that in just a second. I'm going to build up from his first term, and then we're going to go right into what you're talking about there with the religious liberty on trial. So in 2017, Trump delivered some tax cuts. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act lowered corporate tax rates, doubled the standard deduction, and boosted take-home pay for millions of people. But he also rolled back a lot of the regulations that had been placed on business owners, corporate business owners, corporations. So in that sense, Trump's first term is usually compared to the Reagan era. A lot of confidence in free enterprise, which shouldn't be surprising from Trump. And maybe most enduringly, the one thing that Trump, not the one thing, but one thing Trump has done that has been generally conservative and has been a benefit to the nation is his judicial appointments. He pretty much reshaped the Supreme Court and the federal bench with federal court judges, which paved the way for the Dobbs versus Jackson decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade and returned abortion policy to the states. Now, you can think whatever you want about why or how that happened, but it did happen. And this is one of those things that we get to point out to make a fair case. Let's show what was potentially good. Because it's not so simple. Despite the tax cuts, federal spending continued to surge to historic levels. Even before COVID, this was happening. The national debt ballooned by trillions, and the vast federal bureaucracy, that administrative state, and that the founders all feared, still intact, just growing stronger. So Trump's presidency has proved that a single man, no matter how forceful and popular, no single man can drain a swamp that has become really the Capitol's very habitat. That's just how they live. You can't, you can take the man out of the swamp, but you can't take the swamp out of the man, I guess we could say, right? Something like that. So then, last Friday on the 4th of July, 2025, Trump signed what he called his one big beautiful bill. And it's a lot of impressive promises. Once again, permanent tax relief for working families, new deductions for overtime, and no taxes on tips, senior income, child credits. So a lot of help to the tax code. We'll see about that when it comes around. But also, a surge in funding for defense, a surge in funding for ICE, which don't really like to see that, but makes you feel like somehow that, they're working together. Mm-hmm. One party allows 30 million to come in, and the other party comes in and creates a police state to remove them.
It's clear that each party, they are both, it's the uniparty. One uses the other. It's like good cop, bad cop, and then they move the goalposts forward. Like, oh, look at what this one did over here, and look at what that one did over there, and then they do the thing that they want to do,
Well, and also a positive thing he's done is he's expanded support for farmers and small businesses. Now, at the same time, over on the con side, we also now have that allowance for the pipelines to be placed on farms, and, to cause problems.
Where they can just kick people off of their land.
So these few good things come at a steep cost, is what we're trying to tell you. An additional $3 trillion in new deficits. Do you know how much money $3 trillion is? It'll take about 40 to 45 years to pay that off. Also, making some questionable cuts to Medicaid and food aid that may leave millions without there. We'll see about that. It's hard to know for sure, because when you try to read and understand how these policies are going to work, you have to wade through the politics of the person writing the article.
It sure seems like when I was reading the big beautiful bill that they're planning on giving federal money to like rural communities and their medical centers and hospitals, and some of them that have closed down, and offering like, hey, we'll give you funding to open that closed clinic again, but on the conditions of X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm saying? So it's getting that federal control of rural medical clinics and hospitals. So that's very,
looks
that's
good
not good.
Looks good on the surface because, we're bringing these hospitals back online. But then again, what requirements are going to be coming around the corner?
And you can bet that will absolutely be the case. And then, so if you want your funding, you better play by the rules.
Also, a regressive tax structure that still favors the wealthiest. I don't always have a problem with that because it is the wealthiest who employ the most people. But at the same time, lower income households are going to have to shoulder tighter budgets. That's just the way it'll be. Also, the expanded enforcement state with a larger ICE force, more funding, more agents, more intrusive oversight, raising new concerns about civil liberties. So, by the numbers, by the ledger, are we better off? By the raw economic numbers, Americans are better off today than if we go back to the Bush-Obama era, because unemployment is lower, growth is steady, paychecks are larger for many, cost of living also higher, but and the national gross domestic product continues to hum right along for now. But here's the problem. Liberty is not measured by the economy alone. As we showed you right at the top, the sentiment of people in the United States is pretty low. People don't feel free. Economically, the people may be breathing a little easier now, but morally and civically, we're more divided, more suspicious, less anchored to transcendent truth than ever before. And no nation, not even this one, can endure for long if it loses its moral foundation. Now, part of this, which some has written about quite a lot, is the redefinition of democracy, which is another part in the great inversion, right? This turning of things upside down. We're facing today a dangerous semantic shift. Our founders understood, you've heard it, right? The whole our democracy. Trump is a threat to our democracy and all this. Well,
democratic socialism.
Yes. So I thought this might be interesting. I tried to work out how to define it from both sides. So the founders, that's who I'm interested. What did the founders think democracy meant? The founders understood democracy to mean the sovereignty of the people constrained by the chains of the Constitution or the rule of law. Today, progressive leaders, and that's both sides of the aisle, speak of protecting democracy. But what they are defending is the sovereignty of entrenched institutions who are over the people. So when the people question this regime, they're told they're a threat to democracy itself. We heard that whenever, Republicans would question Biden when he was in office. They would bark back and say, you're a threat to
our democracy. This is a threat to our democracy.
On cue.
On cue.
And so when dissent grows, then it becomes labeled a threat to democracy. It's labeled disinformation. Making an absolute truth claim about Jesus Christ is a threat to democracy. Disinformation. When free speech challenges the narrative, it's silenced. All in the name of saving our democracy, they say. Now, that is an inversion that our forebears warned us about. Tyranny dressed in the language of freedom. So the final score. Are we better off? Are Americans better off after Trump's big, beautiful bill, after his first term, after MAGA? They're in office now. So the answer is economically, yes. Right now, we're economically better off. That won't be felt for a while. But it doesn't really matter that much because the most important metric has bottomed out, as we showed you, and that is confidence in the nation. And a main reason for that loss of confidence in government and the nation itself is morally and according to our civil liberties, no, we are not better off. We are far worse off. So this burden, this is the burden of history. A nation can survive a sluggish economy, but no nation, not even the mighty American Republic, can survive the collapse of virtue-based liberty. So you can't look to any man, any party, or any bill to save what only a righteous, self-governing people can preserve. Tyranny, again, is defeated at home, not in Washington, D.C. And that brings us here to this article, Summer, that you've put together here. Religious Liberty on Trial. This one is from July the 7th, right? That's today. Mm-hmm. This was the first one today? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Courts bless LGBT indoctrination and ban the Ten Commandments. So religious liberty on trial in the Trump administration. So you might find this interesting. Again, we're talking here about the inversion of the moral order. That is what will bring us down. So Alex Newman wrote a piece recently, right here, called Courts LGBT in School is Fine, but the Ten Commandments are unconstitutional. And there's Alex's article. And what Summers' point now is that article of Alex's is supportive of the thesis that we've been running with here for a while now, that both federal and state officials are missing or willfully ignoring, and that is a more insidious threat hiding in plain sight. And that is this, that for over 30 years in our schools, the curriculum itself has functioned as a strategic evasion of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. So while we have people complaining about separation of church and state and all of this, the whole time we actually have a religion being inculcated to the children in our public schools and many of our private schools also.
Yeah, it's like there's an elephant in the living room, and it's like a limited hangout. Like there's these court cases, and it looks like there's this feverish battle that's going on for justice, but really neither side is going to get to the root of the problem. So it does look suspicious indeed, because, you know, it's like a misdirection.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is. And how that's right. How it is a misdirection is this next sentence right here. Stripped of religious language and then repackaged in academic jargon, the doctrines of critical pedagogy now embedded in American school systems have been subversively establishing a religion the whole time. Now, how does this relate to Trump? Well, because he was, he said a lot of things about how he was going to defund or
get woke out of the school system.
He was going to get rid of the Department of Education.
Correct.
Which would have been fine, but
but he was saying we want to get rid of DEI and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah, so the problem is that it's already embedded. Mm-hmm. This critical pedagogy is already embedded within.
Yeah.
We'll do.
So it's a huge gaslight on the public, on the American public, because most people won't realize that. They'll see that, he's making moves to do that, to defund and, blah, blah, blah. But they don't understand that it's already been poisoned. Like it's already completely saturated with all of this stuff.
Yeah, let me give you the definition for critical pedagogy here, so you know what we're talking about, because that is the heart of the religion.
I dropped the article that we're looking at in the chat if you guys want to follow along.
All right. Critical pedagogy. Pedagogy just means a teaching theory. So this is critical teaching theory. All right. Is an educational theory and practice that treats teaching as a tool for social and ideological transformation, training students to see all knowledge through power dynamics like oppression and privilege. It replaces neutral education which there's really no neutral education at all, with activist indoctrination. And Joe Kincheloe, for one, and many of those who are supportive of critical pedagogy will tell you that there is no neutrality, and they're right about that. There is no neutral stance here. Requiring students to internalize and act on a specific worldview, right? And that means it functions as a secular religion disguised in academic terms. All right. The Rutherford Institute wrote recently about this, about how the First Amendment right, parents have a First Amendment right to protect their children from mandatory public school instruction. So this is really about children having to read LGBTQ books and things like that. But again, here's the problem. This decision, the Mahmoud versus Taylor in the U.S. Supreme Court, affirmed parental rights in one area, right? It said parents can opt out of LGBTQ readings and parts of the curriculum. Parents would be allowed to opt their children out of those teachings. Here's the problem, though. The entire curriculum, I'll just read it here. It says, while this decision affirms parental rights in one area, it exposes the deeper problem. Education is already saturated with ideological content that functions as religious indoctrination. Again, critical pedagogy is a form of secular moral catechism framed as inclusivity and progress. The ruling highlights how the state conditions access to education on submission to worldview shaping doctrines. Yet, broader doctrines like critical pedagogy and SEL, social emotional learning, and therapeutic diversity training continue right along unchecked. So maybe you're starting to catch on to the pattern here. Everyone's excited about Trump's a lot of people supporting Trump and Republicans are very excited about the big beautiful bill. But the problem is it did exactly the same thing they've been doing. It did exactly what has caused our problems. These big omnibus bills with I don't know how many, teens, hundreds of different policies and special deals mixed in with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's Palantir, and then there's all the money that they're going to be using to bring in the biosurveillance state with AI and all of that that's been sent to, it's like Build Back Better, not the big, beautiful bill, it's the Build Back Better bill. It's basically synonymous, because it's all the tech.
So on one side, you see that they say they're going to fix the education by saying that parents can opt out of these LGBTQ
book reading sessions.
But they're still there.
They're still there.
And then the bigger problem is that it's not just the LGBT stuff. It's the whole curriculum is centered around critical pedagogy and the idea.
It's like a counterfeit gospel.
Exactly what it is. And the reason it is because of this. Traditional learning takes place when students or learners go to the wise instructor or teacher who deposits knowledge into them, gives them a deposit of knowledge and wisdom. Critical pedagogy, don't do that. That's not what it is. What critical pedagogy does is it brings everyone together and allows from all the different perspectives. Let's just say you read one verse of scripture or one paragraph from a history book, and then everyone gets to decide what it means based on their experience. Now that can only lead to confusion and despair.
I wrote an article not long ago about how they wanted to that they were deconstructing pheromones. Just something as basic as pheromones and attraction between men and women. They were trying to say that doesn't exist. So this is all about deconstructing what we know to be true about reality. God's moral order. God's moral order.
That's how you were writing it in that article.
Right. So, it's just.
So you might be wondering, people might be wondering, well, How is it a religion? Why are you calling that a religion? I think you're wrong to call that a religion. Well, we've provided for you in this particular article the argument for why it is a religion. So if you want to see it's this article, Religious Liberty on Trial in the Trump Admin.
Go ahead and read that, though. Just get them started on that.
I will. I'm gonna
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I just wanted to show the title once again.
Okay.
Yeah, wherever it went.
What is a religion?
Yeah, I skipped over this part here, but it's yeah. So why is it a religion? What makes this? This is the argument for critical pedagogy, or let's just say the public school curriculum includes a lot of private schools. We just usually say public school. The curriculum that is created by these non-governmental organizations and sold to school districts, the most common and approved curriculum, is religious. And here's why: because it's founded on critical pedagogy. So the First Amendment's Establishment Clause says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, in practice, courts have interpreted this to mean that the government cannot create, support, or favor any system that functions as a religion. All right, so what we need to do then is to figure out, what did the founders believe a religion was? What does the Constitution believe a religion is? Courts have long recognized that religion under the First Amendment is not limited to traditional faiths like Christianity or Islam. In other words, a belief system qualifies as religious if it addresses ultimate questions of existence, purpose, or morality, appeals to a transcendent or ultimate source of truth, prescribes duties, rituals, or codes of conduct, and claims exclusive authority over conscience or life's meaning. Now pay close attention to prescribes, rituals, codes of conduct, claims exclusive authority over conscience or the meaning of life. All right. We included a couple cases for you to check out if you'd like. You can mouse over these footnotes and it'll tell you about the case law that we found on this. But they confirm that sincerely held comprehensive belief systems, including secular or non-theistic ones, can be religious if they play the same role in shaping conscience and moral duty. All right? So, when government imposes or funds such a system, the threshold for the establishment clause, the establishment of religion, is crossed, even if the system is cloaked in secular language or academic jargon. All right, so by this standard, this is our case, by this standard, critical pedagogy meets the definition of a religion. Because these are just the easy premises and conclusion. Any system of belief and practice or theory and praxis that appeals to an ultimate moral truth or grounds fundamental reality in an unseen source of existential meaning qualifies as a metaphysical or spiritual system. Premise 2. If such a system prescribes ritual, personal allegiance, or transformation, or personal transformation in response, then it qualifies as a religion. So basically, here you have a system of belief and practice that qualifies as a spiritual system, and then you have a set of requirements, a regimented system that makes it religious. So why is the curriculum in public schools religious? Because critical pedagogy, which is critical theory plus critical constructivism, appeals to an ultimate moral truth, social justice or the social gospel. It grounds fundamental reality in an unseen source of existential meaning, which is consciousness, and prescribes ritual, personal allegiance, or transformation, which is critical consciousness, or also what's also known as wokeness, is required in response. And so the conclusion, therefore, critical pedagogy qualifies as a religion. So don't let them tell you anything else. Despite its technical jargon, they've taken all the religious language out of it. But it certainly does establish an overarching, unverifiable authority, an oppressor-oppressed dialectic, and demands moral allegiance and transformation, which mirrors the confessional and catechetical aspects of a faith. Now, when they embed this framework into public education, the state is then promoting a functional religion in violation of the Establishment Clause, because they are binding the consciences of students to a secular creed disguised as neutral instruction. So we go on here to make more cases about why that would be. You check this article out if you want to see the full case. Basically, from the textbooks that train teachers today, it just plainly says it right here. The educational purpose cannot be separated from social justice, human liberation, deeper forms of human interconnection, and the fight for freedom. Critical pedagogy is not just a teaching theory. It is a unified theory, a Weltanschauung, which is a worldview that creates meaning on the nature of human existence. These are quotes directly from the textbooks. And this part, critical theory is concerned with extending a human's consciousness of himself or herself as a social being in light of the way dominant power operates. So, extending one's consciousness. And then there's action to correct, right? So there will have to be transformation. And then this last piece. Learning to be an emancipatory teacher and assuming the role of a producer of dangerous world-changing knowledge to remake and rename their world. They are constantly guided by their critical theoretical system of meaning, their emancipatory source of authority. So there you go.
And I think it's important to just go to briefly to the very next section to bring out about how Agenda 21.
Yeah, the evidence of the false religion.
Well, yeah, how Agenda 21, there's been the inception of that actually brought about a systemic change in education in America. Yeah. And that's a side of Agenda 21 that people don't often talk about, is how that was very much connected, with UNESCO and the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals. So all of what we're telling you about critical pedagogy, it's all linked to, it goes all the way up to the top. It goes up to Sustainable Development Goal, in alignment with that. All of it lines in, and it's all funneling you into this collectivism, oneness religion that we've been talking about. So it's just really interesting to see all of the points come together.
Yeah, it is. And over time, as this work continues, it's interesting to see it all just starts fitting together like puzzle pieces. So with what we've just pointed out to you, this revealing cross-section of the essential doctrines of modern education, now we can apply it to our current circumstance, right? So we can ground our assertion here that a false religion has infiltrated under the guise of secular training. Let's see, 1 second, because I think I can show you. Yeah. Let's see if I can get this to come up here. Yeah, there we go. That worked. See, there's Julian Huxley, first Director General of UNESCO. Right? He wants to create a scientific world humanism. World government will be necessary for the next stage of human evolutionary progress. One of the major tasks of UNESCO is a restatement of morality that shall be in harmony with moral knowledge. Just so you know. And there's also characters like, of course, John Dewey.
Yeah, this is that program. This is that exact program that we're now living in.
John Dewey was the voice of liberal and progressive democracy for over 50 years. So these are movements of progressivism. All right, so let's get back over here.
And of course, you've got Columbia University right in the center of it all.
There it is. Okay. Now, the same federal courts that sanctify compulsory LGBTQ plus indoctrination in government schools, right, are also, through recent federal rulings, the Supreme Court upholding the opt-out rights while affirming the curriculum's legitimacy, do indeed protect LGBTQ plus ideology as part of state-mandated education while restricting parental or local school board pushback. This precedent is real. You can see here more case law and related cases on DEI and SEL policies. Okay, they declare the Ten Commandments unconstitutional because it establishes a religion. Meanwhile, they allow this particular cloaked religion to continue right on. Stone versus Graham in 1980 banned a mandatory posting of the Ten Commandments in classrooms, and that precedent still holds. The recent Fifth Circuit ruling in June of this year, just a couple weeks ago, blocked Louisiana's law. Louisiana wanted to make it mandatory to post the Ten Commandments in the schools, and I personally think that's just the wrong way to approach it. Would you call that woke? You might call that woke, right? You're trying to use the same tools that the enemy is using to win that battle, and it.
Yeah, that's not the right approach.
Yeah, you want again, missing the whole point. The whole point is that the curriculum is religious. It's
Right.
an religious indoctrination again. So, and of course, UNESCO mandated SEL, STEM, and STREAM programs violate religious liberty by, as we pointed out here, indoctrinating the youth with specifically now. Summer has gone. I went from the broad, and Summer brought in the specific here, the theosophical and Eastern mysticism, cloaked in therapeutic language. So critical pedagogy has had all of its religious language stripped from it. Well, actually, theosophy and Eastern mysticism have had their religious language
In
stripped.
most instances. In some cases, they'll do overt, like transcendental meditation, breathing exercises in classrooms, which is more overt.
They don't have to hide it very much today.
Right.
Yeah.
But, like, it's almost like that in and of itself is a misdirection because they're trying to say, hey, look over here. But you guys can opt out of that,
Yeah.
But really, what they're failing to
But
tell
can they?
everybody is that the whole thing is contaminated with this ideology.
And in most cases, as we've heard, a lot of the who are the ladies on Twitter that we've watched their show on YouTube. I can't remember.
The Common Core Diva.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they've been pointing out a lot recently that you actually don't have the right to opt out of those plans, of those programs, right? It's like they might let them opt out, but they require something extra of them. I can't remember what she had said, but it's not quite so simple.
Yeah, we cannot ignore the possibility that our closed, controlled technocratic system is using lawfare and strategic deception to accelerate its plans to dissolve true religious liberty. So there's many headline-grabbing religious liberty cases, if you will, that are trotted out in the public square to stoke division and distract from meaningful debate that could actually restrain this takeover. It is possible that these controlled opposition cases exist precisely to tie up the legal system and drain resources and exhaust public will and project the false image that the courts are vigorously defending biblical freedom. In reality, these performative battles often go nowhere by design, stalling real resistance while the true ideological conquest marches forward through compulsory curricula of theosophical mysticism, gender confusion, and therapeutic mind shaping. And I just want to put one more point out there, whether through cunning orchestration or just genuine confusion within the judiciary, the effect is the same. There's no like coherent argument being made on either side. So the principled argument to halt the indoctrination of our children, what's happening in the school system, the principled argument to halt the indoctrination of our children or to expose its religious nature under the establishment cause, thus the courts become stage props and a managed civil religion that cloaks spiritual subversion in constitutional language, all while global governance frameworks cement their hold on moral order. So I just wanted to put that out there. There's no way to prove if these court cases are, like controlled operation sort of theater, or if it's just pure ignorance, but it's like, or if it's the phenomenon of the woke right, you know what I mean? So you've got these radical factions that are engaged in legal battle, so that, again, they'll tie up the court system and they'll exhaust people, and then plus also give this sort of veneer of, look at your legal system. They're out there doing what it should do. It's healthy. There's debate, But meanwhile, like the real issue is that what very, very few people are talking about is what we're trying to bring light around, us and a few others. Alex Newman is. There's definitely like a few people here and there that are discussing this, but like just this is a religion. The whole curriculum that they're putting into our school system and that they have been for years, for decades, is funneling in people into the theosophical religion.
That's right. And this piece here in the article you put out this morning says here, true in principle and historically documented, once again, UNESCO and CASEL. So CASEL is one of the organizations particularly meant that creates the core competencies, right? That's what CASEL does. They're particularly involved in education. They create the core competencies, right? And so, as you see down here, one of the CASEL's core competencies echoes UNESCO's Learning the Treasure Within from 1996, which explicitly references holistic spiritual formation. Now, you can take this back to Robert Mueller, the mystic who was the Assistant Secretary General, something like that. He was second under the Secretary General at the United Nations. And he created the World Core Curriculum, which became the Common Core Curriculum, and he was a New Age mystic, a theosophist, I guess is what he really is. And as Summers written here, this is not accidental. Summers references here Lisa Logan's writing, specifically here, Agenda 21's true mission was to brainwash students into an all-is-one pantheistic worldview, embedding Buddhist theosophical and occult frameworks. Now that is the essence of theosophy right there.
Yeah.
Into U.S. schools in order to shape sustainable behavior at the expense of biblical moral order. So the inversion of the order. And Trump has just ignored all of this. In fact, he has gone.
He's cheered it on at the office. Exactly. The day of prayer.
He's empowered
because the day of prayer with the Paula White and all that. I mean, they were talking about brain flourishing and all of the stuff that's straight out of the SDG playbook, so the Sustainable Development Goals playbook. So and also, with the inner development goals, like they've got the Sustainable Development Goals, and then they've got the inner development goals, and that even looks like the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah. The conch shell, their logo.
Oh yeah, the inner development goals.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, that was. I thought that was really interesting yesterday. Here's the article. I flipped over here to the article that Lisa got to write here back in May for InfoWars, and it's, let's see.
Yeah, she did a good job on this.
Yeah, here's an uncomfortable but true statement. The United Nations, Agenda 21, has undermined U.S. schools for 2 generations. All right, and she goes on here to show she's got her sources. She brought the receipts. What I was looking for was that right here, seeking the true meaning of peace. This is what I wanted. If I can get this link. For some reason, it doesn't want me to click that link. Oh, there we go. All right, so here's nope, this is something else. Seeking the true meaning of peace. That's 2 hours long. But there's also a book, right?
Yeah, it's in there. It's in the article.
Okay.
If you just go down.
Ah, there we go. That's excellent work. Thank you very much. I was looking all over the place.
There it is.
Yeah. That's what I was saying. That's what I was glad for. Mm-hmm. I was trying to find it over on her thing, but so this book, as Lisa's pointing out here, this book, which is Seeking the True Meaning of Peace, right? It comes from the conference proceedings from 1989 in June. This book presents the proceedings and post-conference contributions of the historic Seeking the True Meaning of Peace conference organized by the University for Peace with the support of the government of Costa Rica. The first gathering of the global family of the university took place in its home base, Costa Rica, in June of '89. This vision was articulated in the Declaration of Human Responsibilities for Peace and Sustainable Development, this is 1989, folks, which was presented in October of 1989 to the General Assembly of the UN. This document also serves as a framework of a global education program presented herein. And as Logan here points out, right here, this articulation of universal responsibility derives from Mahayana Buddhism's assumption of universal compassion as a prime motivating value for human development. Education repurposed as spiritual engineering. Book says we need a new world education. We need the cosmic education foreseen by the religions and by people like Maria Montessori, of course. We need a holistic education teaching the holism of the universe and of the planet. Again, now there's Robert Mueller, who is quoted in the book we just showed you. The Robert Mueller School is based upon the teachings of Alice A. Bailey, who got her information channeled from a
demon.
A demon, yes, an ascended master called Dwajkul. The underlying philosophy will be found in the books of Alice A. Bailey. So if you read the works of Alice A. Bailey and Blavatsky, you will find those doctrines embedded in public education.
Yes.
And it's here also. Education 2000 called for teaching all subjects and lessons through the religious, without calling it that, lens of holistic, that the earth and everything in it is interconnected and interdependent.
Oneness, collectivism.
Oneness. So education that teaches holism, starting in the early 1990s, has transformed classrooms into today's woke indoctrination camps, and occultism gave birth to social emotional learning. Now, I want to do this while we're here too, because we haven't had the opportunity to promote this article yet. And I want to make sure that we do. And that is right here. One of Summer's personal pieces. You folks need to go read this one. This one is exceptionally interesting. My mentor was a Black Panther, freedom rider, with a UN PhD in global governance. So what Summer gives you here? You want to explain what you give here?
Well, I take people on a journey, a step-by-step journey with me about what it was like to grow up in inner city Atlanta and then in the mid-'90s. And I was in high school, and so some of you might know my Matrix Override trilogy that has been out there for a few years now, but we did incorporate this back in to this piece, this article, and we re-uploaded them, and basically showing how this United Nations system was very much like my headmaster. We called her a headmaster. She had a PhD in echistics, which is the study of all the ologies: psychology, sociology, anthropology, and human settlements. And so basically, like this, she started a nonprofit, and it was like a campus for the United Nations. And I didn't even realize that, like as I got older, and even when we first developed Matrix Override a few years ago, I didn't realize to the extent in which it's like I've uncovered a whole nother layer of, just the fact that this was like a UN project, a UN campus, using group dynamics and social dynamics, and using these plays that the students would have to perform each year. You'd have to, a couple times a year, perform I Too Am America. And that was also about, like, it was very much like, if you think about it, training people even at the cellular level to have compassion for and to be bought into these ideas of social justice issues, right? So you would be deeply invested in and connecting to and resonating with the plight of, the social justice movement, which of course, as we all know, we want everybody to be respected. We are all creatures of God, right? Like we are all God's children and worthy of love and respect and decency. But as you know, this has been weaponized. So just to show how even in the mid-90s, the intricacies of the ins and outs and what have yous.
I'll read this little opening here because I think it'd be useful for people. So just
how many years? This has been decades. We've been steeped in this stuff for a long time.
Right. This is Architecture of Mass Illusion in the Making from the mid-1990s, PW, pre-woke. So this is what it says. Where I'm from, high school wasn't education, it was ideological indoctrination. You might assume I grew up in China, former Soviet Union, or maybe Afghanistan. But no, I tell you. I was born and raised in the American South, specifically inner city Atlanta, just beyond the city perimeter. The Bible Belt still held to traditional values, but inside the city limits, it was a different world entirely. I often reflect on my high school experience, especially the years from 10th to 12th grade. In hindsight, both amazed and dismayed at how subversive yet obvious the indoctrination had been. While the term woke wouldn't appear for another 20 years, the ideological training was present and intentional, if never openly named, at least as early as the mid-1990s. For decades, the scientific religion of progressivism has quietly metastasized through America's schools, capturing the minds of future leaders in a methodical, unseen takedown of the American way of life. What was once whispered in euphemism is now declared with boldness, and still we sleep. What follows is Summer's experience, clarified through decades spent researching to understand the forces at work in her own life, and she would like to present it to you prayerfully. May it shake you awake, and Lord willing, inspire you to be a watchman. And that would be the goal here of this. We can see the videos, the Matrix Override videos are included here. I just think this is an excellent piece here, Summer, and just since it's more of a personal piece that actually demonstrates what we're talking about that was happening.
Yeah, read that one section about the echistics.
Okay, where at?
You just cruised by it. It was the very first section. There.
Yeah, from my sophomore year through senior years, I attended Horizons School, an experimental K-12 program in Atlanta's Lake Claire neighborhood. Horizons was officially a subsidiary of the Educational Center for Applied Echistics, Incorporated. As my research will show, Horizons was an early model for the universal application of critical pedagogy, and the indoctrination of the worldview later mandated by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 21. Founded by Dr. Lorraine Wilson, who was Summers' headmaster at Horizon School, and Les Garber in 1978. The Educational Center for Applied Ecistics embodied the core principles of ecistics, which is the merging of education, social architecture, and environmental design into a behavioral control system. In other words, what? The study.
Agenda 21.
The study of all theologies, which is
right.
Ultimately that is Agenda 21.
And the smart cities, like, so it's the culmination of all of that. Like, so this is is Agenda 21.
That's what the Sustainable Development Goals are, is the study of all theologies. It's got everything is covered in that. Mm-hmm. So this is something that you need to check out.
This is an unveiling of Agenda 21 that I've not seen anybody do any research on. I've never seen anyone bring this out. So it's unique and it's really interesting, and I'd love to hear you guys' feedback on it.
Yeah, this piece here, when schools became mental hospitals, talks about, when social emotional learning, maybe not under that name, but the concept was formally introduced in the U.S. education system in the early 1990s, which was a pivotal shift away from traditional academics and toward behavioral and emotional conditioning. In other words, teachers will become therapists. In 1994, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, was established, originally housed at the Yale University Child Study Center to coordinate and expand social emotional learning nationwide. So this is what's interesting, is Summers' article is giving you an account of a particular school that was all about it. What began as a fringe concept quickly became central to education policy, backed by federal funding and globalist organizations like UNESCO. SEL reframed the classroom around identity, emotion regulation, and collectivist values, effectively turning schools into laboratories for psychological reprogramming. And the hits keep on coming. This is a great piece. I think you folks would really enjoy this. So please read this and share it around. And you've also got 3 videos that go along with the narrative. And you can see here how ecistics
is directly tied to being a Freedom Rider Black Panther activist.
Well, ecistics is directly
it's
connected to the United Nations through Constantinos Doxiadis.
Yes, I'm just also trying to say, the fact that she was a Freedom Rider Black Panther movement activist in the 1960s, and then she takes the pathway of getting this PhD in global governance, essentially, which is Agenda 21, and opens a school campus specifically.
Yeah, so this is an excellent piece. I hope you guys will check this out and share it around. Okay. Let me come back here now. All right. Do you have anything you want to?
I mean, we've hit a lot of points. Probably.
Yeah, I thought I'd go ahead and wrap it up, and we'll be back with you as soon as we can. So the question then is this: Are we better off after Trump's big beautiful bill? Has Trump made us freer? Economically, you can make a case for yes, for now. There will be many short-term positives economically. However, morally, and in our grasp of true liberty, no, we're not better off if we continue drifting with the current of our times. G.K. Chesterton said, "A dead thing can go with the stream, but only a living thing can go against it." And so these words remind us that the cost of true freedom is not comfort or complacency. The cost of true freedom is life. It's the stubborn courage to swim against the current of an age that calls evil good and good evil. Chesterton knew what many in our day have forgotten. that the cult of progress is itself a counterfeit religion. It worships technological and social advancement as if they were the ultimate goods. But at the same time, it neglects the moral soul that must restrain and guide them. True progress, rightly understood, is never merely material. It is moral, spiritual, and ethical first. That's why we call them first principles. Chesterton warned that modern progressives change the vision to suit the world, rather than changing the world to fit the vision. That's subjectivism. And that vision, once rooted in transcendent truth, has been traded for hollow slogans and shifting standards. Plato and Aristotle taught us that a society must cultivate a well-ordered soul before it can hope to order its politics and sciences rightly. But the Enlightenment, for all its gifts, left us with an unbridled individualism, a reckless faith that human reason and science alone could save us, even while severing their roots from the fear of God. Jacques Ellul called it the technological society, a world where the machine becomes its own master. Canadian sociologist Charles Taylor described our secular age as an age disoriented, fragmented, and enthroning man as the measure of all things, while losing all measure together. Scripture, of course, saw it coming. Genesis 1 calls us to take dominion, but only within the boundaries of God's law. And then Genesis 3 shows us what happens when man seeks knowledge and power without obedience. The result will be curse, chaos, and death. Proverbs 14:12 says it best. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. Romans 12:2, Paul calls all of us, in words that are as clear now as they ever were, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because without that renewal, no amount of money, no Supreme Court decision, no presidential promise will save us. The 20th century proved it. We witnessed technological miracles side by side with slaughterhouses of modern warfare. The Holocaust and the quiet genocide of tens of millions of unborn lives in sterile clinics. And so here we are again. We've just come through another Independence Day in a nation that once pledged its life, fortune, and sacred honor to the cause of liberty. Today, the outlook is bleaker than at any point in our living memory. But if we wonder how to recover, then there is an answer. And the answer is both timeless and wild. Self-government under God. Eric Metaxas writes in his book, If You Can Keep It, that America was never an empire of blood or tribe. It was the first nation founded on an idea by a specific group of people. But that idea was liberty. And liberty would have to be defined scripturally, because that's who determined that would be part of the system. But that liberty is only possible when free men govern themselves and their families and their churches and their towns. As Metaxas writes, it was a wild idea, something shocking and precious. And if we're to keep it, we have to see it in a new way. We have to reclaim our moral spine. And remember that this republic's mission was never just for us. Liberty was given to us that it might shine for the world. Like the torch in Lady Liberty's hand. Like the city on a hill metaphor John Winthrop envisioned. A true American does not need or seek credit. Our greatness is not in the wealth we hoard or the power we flaunt, but in the gospel light that we've been privileged to reflect. So when that light dims, then the whole world suffers. And if we lose the moral vision that made us free, the machines and markets we worship will bury us, and the world will mourn our fall. So like Ben Franklin said when he was asked outside the hall that day after they had finished writing the Constitution, or the first parts of it anyway, and the lady asked him on the street, "What have you wrought, Ben? Is it a monarchy, or what kind of government have you given us?" And Franklin said, "It's a republic, if you can keep it. And keep it we must. But it requires courage. It requires a living courage that swims upstream with virtue that restrains your personal ambition, and with repentance that turns dead things living again." So let's remember this, with all of these new things happening now in our nation. Things can be confusing. Psalm 33:12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. So may we be alive enough to swim against the stream for our children's sake and our neighbor's sake and the glory of Christ the King. All right.
Thank you, Brad.
I thought you might want to tell the folks.
No, thank you guys. Thanks for being with us as always. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, please make sure, if you would, to download that Armor of Truth mobile app, if you could, please. That would be.
And join
as early as
Substack
1928,
also.
the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric.
Goes a long way.
By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart, and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. The average American, they say, soft and decadent, he'll become paralyzed with fear and panic. He'll run away and hide and do nothing to interfere as they strike at the community's power center. Any all-out revolution must create a state of crisis wherein almost all of the male population would be forced to remain in their homes because of its affluence. It has waxed soft. The motive force behind its life drive is its endless pursuit of prestige, conspicuous consumption, and sensual pleasure. After the stage is properly set, America could be brought to her knees in 90 days. Ladies and gentlemen, the organization behind these preparations has almost unlimited financial resources. Our enemies are deadly serious about their task, and it's nothing short of national suicide for us to continue to ignore their plans and their progress. The strategy calls for the quiet conversion of our government. They have one and only one solution for all problems. More government, and then more and more until it's total government. In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist. Label them as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
I'm presenting a Christian perspective. You guys are Christians, and you're ignoring the Christian perspective. You want to refute me? Open your Bible up and come at me!
Absolutely preposterous.
Paranoia is in bloom. The PR transmissions will resume. They'll try to push drugs to keep us all dumbed down and hope that we will never see the truth around. Another promise, another seed, another a package lie to keep us trapped in greed, and all the green belts wrapped around our minds, and endless red tape to keep the truth confined.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
They will not force us. They will stop degrading us. They will not control us. We will be victorious.
Because I don't hate anybody. Now I want to see every single solitary person on this earth. I want to see their soul saved. Every single solitary person. And each and every one of us that calls ourselves a Christian should pray vehemently for their souls, that we would see them in heaven and forget about all this when we get up there.